Welcome, everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I am so honored to be joined by Nightly News Hall of Famer, Brian Christiana. Brian, welcome back to the podcast, and it's wonderful to have you back here on campus. It's been quite some time since we had you on. I believe the last time we had you on was after the Hall of Fame ceremony.
Yeah, so that's a year and a half about, Paul. Holy cow.
I would say darn near 2 years at this point.
Yeah, it would be, yeah.
Because it was I'm thinking there's...
November.
Was it that late in the year?
It was November of 21?
Interesting. So just while we're on that subject of the Nightly News Hall of Fame, we will be, in certain circles we've already announced, but we will be making an official announcement of our Hall of Fame inductees for this year. We are going to be a part of an official event of Homecoming Weekend and one of the kickoff events of the Homecoming and Fall Harvest celebration. And so hopefully we'll have you back here in October to welcome in our new Hall of Fame inductees. So we will certainly have much more information about that over the summer. But the Nightly News Hall of Fame, this will be our third induction.
It'll be a great, great day, Paul. It really will.
And hopefully we'll get to see Norm Geary and Sherry Long.
The list goes on and on.
Christine Fusselman. I don't want to exclude anybody, but definitely looking forward to announcing our Hall of Famers coming up this year. So why we're here today is we are going to talk about Brian's upcoming CPC Film Series event that's going to be taking place on Friday, May 19th at 6 o'clock in the Capitol Blue Cross Theater. Brian's going to be showing presenting on V for Vendetta before the film screening. So we're going to be here to talk about that. Also being joined here today by Nightly News sports reporter Andrew Hunter. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And so Andrew, his role here is Andrew is actually one of the folks who is covering this fine event for the Nightly News. So he's just going to sit in today, ask a couple of questions, and hopefully we get to learn more about Brian and his history with film. Well, Brian, let's start off at the beginning. First of all, probably for about a year, you've been asking to get on the calendar for the film series. Brian, you are also very involved with the film series just as a student and as the president of the Nightly News. You attended almost all of the film series. So when you think back, what is one of the film series events that we had that you remember and really kind of pushed you to want to actually do this?
So yeah, we were at the first one ever, which... Oh, man. Was the first one Jaws?
The first one was Jaws.
Yes, Jaws. Went to that one. Then Brant did one. There's been so many.
It's foggy in the sense that I remember all of the different presenters, but it's difficult for me to recall
who did Man in Tights?
That would have been Tom Davis.
Okay, so Tom did that one.
But that one came much later.
Really?
Yes.
I saw Marcy.
So she did Harry Potter, and that was also probably in the first year.
Yep.
I would say that was one of the first 2 or 3.
Airplane.
Of course, I did Lebowski. I actually did the second.
I saw both of yours.
So you're asking me who did the second one? I did.
Oh, look at that.
Because Lebowski was the second one. Anyway, I actually went to the trouble to compile the list for a previous story that I did. When Leslie presented Scott Pilgrim, I went through and actually tallied all the different film series. But the bottom line is, we have been doing this for 6 years. We started doing this in 2017.
Wow. Okay, yeah.
Because that was in 2017 when I presented Big Lebowski.
That was a good time. Yeah, down in the theater, we got the camera that we used for baseball, and then we did the little because Curtis was doing a fundraiser during that, and we did a little preview on YouTube or Facebook, one of them.
Yeah.
And it was a really good time.
You've always been super interested in this, and I'm so glad that students gravitate to this, because we are really trying to think of some different ways to approach this. When it was initially started, it was the Humanities Film Series.
Yep.
And the Humanities Film Series served as a way for our faculty members in our Humanities department to have an interesting dialogue about film.
And that's exactly what, like you said, I think it also was a very good way of getting the teacher or the presenter to the student. Thinking of Andrew's perspective, he'll be there. I hopefully see him sitting down there, watching a film and learning different things that, maybe I didn't think that before. That's a different way of getting that perspective. So it's a great tool for students to really expand their mind on something.
Well, and I think a lot of these films are socially relevant.
Yeah.
Certainly, we'll talk about V for Vendetta here in a moment. But for example, last summer, Adrian did Dirty Dancing.
It's Dirty Dancing.
But what's interesting about that, and what Adrian's presentation was about how even a film that came out 40 years ago, let's call it 35 years ago, is still relevant today because a lot of the film background in Dirty Dancing dealt with abortion, which is still a very, very important topic to this day, especially since last summer's reversal of in Jackson versus Mississippi. A lot of people refer to it as the law that sort of repeal Roe versus Wade. So the point that she was making, and this was just weeks after that happened, is she was talking about how even back in the 60s when this was filmed, when it was taking place,
yes,
the same types of things are still relevant. And I do think that that's going to be something that we'll talk about here with you too, Brian.
I personally love Patrick Swayze, just saying. He was great in Dirty Dancing. Roadhouse.
But what's really interesting here is a lot of times the professors are looking for a particular angle and educate about different aspects of the film or the social relevance of it. I would say about 2 years ago, really right around the pandemic, when we were trying to figure out how to make this work, we decided that we were going to take a step back from it just being the Humanities Film Series and move to the CPC Film Series.
Yeah.
So we've had people from the legal department, we've had people from criminal justice, of course, we've had people from English and communications, and we've had people from all across campus present as part of the CPC Film Series. And so, in addition, we've also had some students and alumni. Not only did we have Jen Dulac present, we had Leslie present as a student, and we also had Dylan Bowman just present most recently as an alumni member.
1917,
which
that was pretty cool.
Really cool. Andrew, did you get to check that film out?
I did not. I was busy that night.
And certainly not holding that against you, but I mean, it was just so interesting and unique how Dylan presented on it. And this is what's interesting, Brian, is everybody kind of takes their own spin on it, and that's good, and you have the latitude to do that.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is when you ask, honestly, you probably asked 2 years ago.
It's been
initially.
I mean, it's been something that we've all wanted. I personally have wanted to do for a while, but I'm just glad that my time is up.
One of the things that is a challenge is we do try to schedule a year out for that. I do know that Dylan is going to be screening his own feature film that he shot on campus in summer, and Dean Rife also wants to give it another crack.
Jared does a very good job. So
he's wonderful.
Yep.
So is it fair to say that part of the reason you wanted to do this is because, number one, you'd been involved in it in the past, but number two, that you're such a fan of film?
I would say so. I mean, seeing it, going back on the first part you said, finally getting to be that person on the other side of it is just something that I was definitely excited for. I mean, just seeing the hype behind it, seeing all the interaction, and I think it's just good to have my family and friends involved.
I think it's wonderful. Of course, your brother's still here for a little while.
Yeah.
You can get him involved. You can get some folks from campus to come down, but also, of course, friends and family. I remember when I did it, I'd say a lot of the people who were in the audience were friends and family of mine, and I think that some speakers do really, really try to get people to come out, and that's really what we're looking for. I will say that Dylan's, it's very tough in terms of sheer numbers, but in terms of ones that we've had post-COVID, I think Dylan's actually had the most people.
That's fantastic.
I want to say we had between 60 and 70 people at this 1917 presentation. Now, of course, Dylan brought his family and friends, but there were also very, very, very well represented here from students as well.
And that's awesome because he's such a hardworking guy who has put a lot of time into the college, a lot with the club here. So I'm glad it paid off for him, seriously.
So I want to talk to both of you just a little bit about your experience with film, and I'm going to start with Andrew. So, Andrew, when you think about film and you look back in your life, and what are some of the films that are more memorable? List some of those films and maybe why they struck a chord with you.
Growing up, I always watched Adam Sandler, and what's that movie with
Happy
Gilmore? Yep.
I just watched that like 2 weeks ago.
That's a good film.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, I love that film growing up. It's just Adam Sandler brings so much light, even though when you're having a bad day, he's just so funny and just can bring anyone up.
Have you watched Murder Mystery 2?
Yep. First day it came out.
My
first
wife
seconds.
got me into that.
Yep, I love that. I love that movie too.
So, on one hand, you like to laugh. Obviously, most of Adam Sandler's movies are pretty funny. He's done some serious roles.
Yeah, like Anger Management. I don't know if you can consider that a comedy much, but I mean, he's done like Adam Sandler's done some really good work over the years.
Absolutely. And so we like the comedy pieces. What about the more dramatic films? What are some of those films that you like?
Pursuit of Happiness with
Will Smith.
Will Smith and Jaden Smith. I just love it.
I haven't seen that one, but I will say, is it 7 pounds or 8 pounds?
He was in 7 pounds.
That 7 pounds. That is a film that I left watching that like almost an entirely different person.
Yeah, same with that iRobot he did. Do you remember that one?
iRobot's very good, but I
What wasn't he?
Didn't have quite the same
he,
impact.
No, was he Independence Day?
yes.
Yeah, that was very popular by him. I mean,
Will Smith is done. I of course love the Bad Boys franchise.
well, yeah, that's pretty.
and they're coming
too.
out with a new one, of course.
Him and Martin.
That shouldn't surprise anybody. But you also said that you liked Samuel L. Jackson. So tell me a little bit about what it is about Jackson that speaks to you.
My girlfriend got me into Marvel movies, and he's in there, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Nick Fury, right?
Yep.
Nick
yep.
Fury,
And
yeah.
I just love his role there. He's in almost all the movies, and his just role from role to role is just incredible.
Jackson is one of the most prolific actors in Hollywood.
Well, yeah, he's in Star Wars.
He's Mace Windu, of course,
Yeah.
in the prequels. And there was talk that
might come back.
They were going to bring him back in some type of capacity. Because here's the thing, even though, spoiler alert, he was slain in Star Wars.
Yeah, they cut his hand off and he flew out the window.
Yes, he can still come back as a Force ghost.
Oh, 100%.
You know?
I mean,
So-
Liam Neeson did. Why
Yeah,
can't he?
Exactly. So he can come back. I will say what I love most about Jackson, though, is I'm a huge Quentin Tarantino fan.
Yep.
So, of course, films like Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, Hateful Eight, even he was got to be in another one that for whatever reason I can't think of off the top of my head. But those are three that he was definitely in and starred in and just absolutely love him. But he has got the most interesting range. I mean, he literally can be anyone. And of course, I get that that's the purpose of being an actor.
I mean, Coach Carter alone.
Yeah, I love that movie too, and I'm so into basketball. And I love coaches that like scream and push their players to the max.
Big fan of Samuel L. Jackson. Brian, what about you? What are some, when you think to some of your favorite films and some of even your favorite actors, actresses, who do you think?
I mean, I'm all over the place. I mean, I can be like Andrew, watch a good Sandler film, watch a Ben Stiller, watch Vince Vaughn, and so forth. But then there's days I'm all Harry Potter. Then there's days where I'm Star Wars. Then there's, your animated, your Shreks, your so forth. I mean, I'm pretty well rounded. A good rom-com too, Paul. Not gonna lie. Talking about baseball, the one with Jimmy Fallon, Fever Pitch. That's always one I enjoy watching. But yeah, V for Vendetta is definitely one that I've watched multiple times. Really love it. Love Roadhouse. I know I brought up earlier. Roadhouse is one that always gets me with Swayze.
And they remade that too, right? If
they did, I never saw it.
If it's, and I'm sorry that I'm not more up on this, but if they didn't, they are.
Yeah,
it's either in development or it might already be out. I'll have to look that up. But
and then I am a huge Willy Wonka guy. That's something not many people know. Like I am a big because of the music involved with it, and there's going to be a new Wonka film coming out at the end of the year. That's going to be fantastic. That Willy Wonka, I think, really also helped my personality out. Very well rounded, in my opinion, at least. Gave me a different perspective of life in general. So. Just very well-rounded. That's what I would say.
But I would also say that what you literally just said that film has the power to do is it changed your perspective on life.
Oh, my goodness. And I've said this before. I think I've even said it on the podcast before. The one thing that has made my personality the way it is, and it might come off nerdy, I say this, but it's WWE.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Because that is a character, if you think about it. It's a movie character. It's a TV character and so forth. But seeing someone live to the crowd, and it's what I try to do with baseball. Get the crowd behind you. You see a fan really involved with it, you try to back them up. You're trying to sell somebody too, and that's what you're doing in film a lot. And when you're on a stage and they give you like
improv?
a scenario, you're improv also in a way. So that type of like scenery and all that kind of stuff helps build. I always thought it built my character and the person I am today.
So one of the things that in my study and my research for my PhD program is that I study film and television, and a lot of times I when I talk to people, it's like, well, why are you studying that, and why is that important? Of course, there's people out there saving lives and creating a greener society, and I'm sitting here talking about film and television. But the thing is that there is a lot of reason why studying popular culture is important, and that's why I've really gravitated to working through the CPC Film Series, just about how we understand what life is all about and how we understand our role within it. A lot of that does come from film. I'll give you an example. When I think back to some of the moments of my adolescence that I remember, one of them that always sticks out is seeing Fight Club.
Yeah.
The day that I went to see Fight Club and what that did to my mind. I was 18 years old, so I was certainly legal to go see it, or it's not like I snuck in. My point being is that film really helped shape my ideologies about corporate America, and of course I wasn't going out Project Mayhem style and doing that type of thing, but it really helped me really in a sense develop my own personality as I was growing up post high school. And I think that that's also easy to be said for a lot of things in popular culture, that the things that we spend our time and invest our time in do actually translate into the real world. And then by studying these things, it helps you take a broader look at our society as a whole.
Yeah.
And I think that's just but one way. Well, Brian, of course, we want to talk a bit more about this film, V for Vendetta.
Can I ask you one more question? And again, it's kind of off topic, but I just started a new show, Paul, and I just want to see if have you ever watched Shameless?
No, I have not, but I certainly do know a lot of people who I do know are big
I
fans.
just started it, and you know what? It's crazy how that show relates to the problems that inner cities are having right now. And just a show that I just started watching, very intrigued by it, and my interest for it is really high right now.
So let's talk a bit more about the 2005 V for Vendetta.
Yes.
First off, one of the things that we always try to talk about with these films is it does have an 8.2 IMDb rating.
Yeah.
IMDb ratings are relatively important.
It is. It's very important.
It's almost like crowdsourced ratings in a sense, because you can go on, but it has 1.1 million ratings, and it's got an 8.2, which is actually, it might not seem like it, but really, really high.
Yeah, when you look at other films, there's like some pretty good films that are rated much lower than that.
And really, I want to say like the best films, I'll have to like pull it up, but like even the best films, even like the Pulp Fictions of the world are like 9.4.
Yeah.
And so 8.2 is very highly respected. In fact, most of the films that people decide to do for the film series are typically 8.0 or above in most cases. So this was a 2005 film. The logline is, in a future British dystopian society, a shadowy freedom fighter known only by the alias of V plots to overthrow the tyrannical government with the help of a young woman.
Yeah, so I'll give a little bit of a summary of that. So there's a gentleman. He goes by the name V. His main term that he always says is, remember the 5th of November. That's what he says all the time. And what's the Roman numeral for 5?
V.
V, exactly. So he was in a concentration camp back during World War II area time. When he escapes, there was a fire at the concentration camp. He's the only one that survived, and his goal is to pretty much kill all the people that put him through the concentration camp. The reason he came up with the whole V thing was because his room number was number 5 with V. So it comes to current day, and he's trying to overrule the government because a lot of the people that were in charge during that time are now in charge of the government. So he eventually kills all the people that almost ended his life.
Is this a spoiler alert? Or
This is kind of a spoiler in a way, but I mean, it's been out since 2005. Let's be honest here. But it's very good. Natalie Portman plays a very good role of being like his sidekick, even though in a way she doesn't want to. But she got tied into it so early in the beginning that there's nothing she really can do.
One of the interesting things that I do like to share with people, and that really just in researching for this, I learned, this is really the first experience and film that was done by the Wachowskis who did The Matrix. So in fact, they were the directors of the Matrix trilogy. They are actually the writers of this film. What, if any, similarities are there between this particular film and the Matrix
In
trilogy?
my honest opinion, I think the lighting is very similar. Like, the Matrix is a dark, it's a very dark background and all of it. And this is very similar. This doesn't really happen during the daytime much. During the day, V is really in his underground lair, and he comes out at night. So that's what I really caught between those two films is the darkness.
I wonder if that's something that you might want to compare.
That could be, yeah.
And, in your presentation, obviously Brian still's got, from when we
Couple
record
weeks.
several weeks to be able to sort of isolate what he wants to do. But again, I think that's worth speaking to and maybe just look at some of the similarities. But I can just see from the trailer that it looks very much like the Matrix. So let's talk about this film a bit more. One of the things that I know you wanted to talk about was its role in sort of comic book lore. But what I want to preface this by is outside of Chris Nolan's Batman films, honestly, Batman Begins, I believe I already looked this up, and Batman Begins and V for Vendetta came out the same year, 2005. A lot of people point to Batman Begins as sort of a renaissance movement for how action superhero films exist today, right? And how Batman was really the catalyst for that. But I would argue V for Vendetta also helped that movement and maybe is a bit more under-recognized because Batman is such a big brand and V is not. And so first of all, how did V for Vendetta sort of fit into this DC universe?
That's a great question, and that's the thing. Like, I didn't know until watching it. Probably after I would say honestly, I've seen it now about 8 or 9 times. Just because, again, great film. I always feel like I learn something new after I watch it every time. You would never think it's a superhero film, but it is considered a superhero film because you usually think of your Supermans, your Spider-Mans, and so forth. The good guy always wins. Well, unfortunately, he's not a good guy. He's actually the bad guy, probably. In all reality, though, he is trying to kill other bad guys.
Right.
So he's not your typical superhero, but society now these days, Paul, want that superhero that's not really good. That's why Deadpool
It's called
an
an anti-hero.
Exactly.
And interestingly enough, Brian, we were talking about My Big Lebowski presentation.
Is the Big Lebowski really a good guy?
No, that's the whole point.
Exactly.
That's the whole point, is that I was actually talking about what it meant to be an anti-hero and how more modern looks, and even Batman, even the Christian Bale Batman was not necessarily a good person. In fact, he was a stuck-up rich guy who had a bunch of toys. And, of course, you could give him credit for trying to rid the city of criminals.
Yeah.
But he wasn't a good person.
No. Have you seen the Christian Bale ones?
I have not. I'm
oh
not
my
into
goodness.
superheroes.
Holy cow. I mean, look at the Joker alone. I mean, in the second one, I'm drawing a blank on the Australian. He passed away. The Joker.
Heath Ledger,
yes. I mean, that film alone, these films like Batman, V for Vendetta, it was really just something that the fan was not used to seeing, something dark.
It was definitely different. And so I think just the point that I wanted to make here, Brian, before we move to the conclusion of the podcast here is, I think when people look back in film, and even about 20 years now, to how some of these superhero films have evolved. They used to be cheeky and funny
like,
and over
George
the top.
Clooney and
Correct.
Michael Keaton. You have a Joker that's always smiling. Then when Heath Ledger finally came onto the scene, it's dark and it's like... Yeah, and then just Joaquin Phoenix recently with the Joker. I mean, we never saw that stuff before. And these two, V for Vendetta and Batman Begins...
Well, certainly the whole Batman trilogy, but I think what the point that I'm trying to get at is I think that this film was never given really a fair shake for being such an important part of the way that
we view
comic book movies even today. I mean, when you look at the top 10, 15, 20 films of a given year, half of them are comic book films. It didn't used to be like that.
No.
Batman, Superman, they did fine, but they weren't just massive blockbuster hits.
It was your Vin Diesel type of movies where you have the race cars and the big muscle guys, and I mean now it's superhero movies. Let's be honest.
I suppose what I'm getting at is I don't know in the sort of landscape of V for Vendetta that it gets a fair shake. I mean, it only brought in a $70 million in the U.S. and $134 million worldwide, which for 2005 isn't terrible. I'm sure financially it went down as a big success, but I don't think when you look at sort of the trajectory of comic book films, that V for Vendetta gets its fair shake because of when it came out right around the time of Batman, and because of the success not only of Batman Begins, which made hundreds of millions of dollars, but also then The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, both who made over $1 billion.
Fantastic movies, yes.
And so I wonder if that might also be something that you might discuss.
Definitely talking about that in The Matrix with the writers, and then talking about Batman. That's very good stuff, Paul.
But even just how this film is almost compared to Batman, the types of almost all the scenes are happening at night. There's you can even just see in the trailer here. There's the way color is being used here is very interesting. There's an interesting red that's being shown throughout. You can even see in some of the background the reds. So even just some of the color palettes that are being used in these films really set the stage for what we're seeing today, and the amount of influence that we're seeing in the new Marvel and DC films really has come from V for Vendetta, and even certainly taking nothing away from Christopher Nolan, the Batman trilogy. But again, I think V for Vendetta was almost ahead of its time, I guess is what I'm getting at.
And when you're saying about its time and all that, like we were talking pre-show about, there's a scene in this film where it brings about Catholic priests, and that was a really big thing a couple of years ago. Still to this day is a pretty big thing. And then there was a scene also in the film, oh my god, I'm drawing a blank on it now. There was another scene in the film, though, where he finally overthrows the government, and with all the fireworks and all that, and all the people came out of their houses finally and celebrated. We saw that similarity when we had the election in 2020. So there's just different ways that we see the stuff happening then that's happening now.
Very interesting. Any final thoughts you have here, Andrew, or just looking forward to the CPC Film Series?
I've never seen this movie, and I'm excited to give it a try.
And would you say that you're fans of other superhero movies, or is there any one property that you get into or always make sure you see?
I watched Spider-Man growing up, but that's pretty much it for me.
I got to be honest with you. I went to Into the Spider-Verse not knowing it was a cartoon.
Oh yeah,
and then watched it. I'm like, that was actually really, really cool. But of course, the most recent Spider-Man, I get to see all of the Spider-Man.
Tom
movies.
Holland does a very good job. I'm still a Tobey Maguire guy, but
it was nice to see them all together. I thought it was really interesting. Well, hey, I don't want to keep us here any longer. I appreciate both of you gentlemen being here. And Brian, there's no question about it. Campus is already buzzing about Friday, May 19th for V for Vendetta. Doors will open at 6 o'clock. Brian's presentation will start about 6:30. He'll be doing a brief autograph signing beforehand. And
are we going to have posters? I don't know. What are we signing?
I'm sure we can make that happen.
I'll say, what are we signing?
But we are going to make sure that Brian's going to be there at 6, and 6:30 the presentation starts. 7 o'clock we'll do the screening.
Yep.
And Brian, we're really just looking forward to it, and it's so wonderful that this is something that is a priority to you.
Yeah, I'm very
after graduating.
Yeah, very thankful for you and Mike really getting me involved still to this day. Sports has really kicked off here with the relationship that we all continue to have. But this is just something I've really, really looked forward to. And I think it's just cool to have a night with Aaron, and a really good night to have family with Aaron and I together, and especially with all of you great people.
Well, we're happy to be there. And Andrew, thank you so much, not only for taking an interest in doing a preview story here, but your continued work with the club. You continue to do an amazing job with athletics, and I just want to give you just the ultimate kudos. You've done just such a wonderful job, and I hope that as you get these baseball stories put up, you can look back and give yourself a lot of credit, because you've done a really, really tremendous job.
Yep, thank you at any time.
So, all right, well, thank you so much, Brian, for being here. As always, it's a pleasure. I hope to have you on again when we have a Hall of Fame induction ceremony down the road.
I think we're going to have a really good time with that, Paul. I mean, there's a lot of good things to celebrate with the fine individuals being inducted that day. And we're just going to it's just a day of celebration.
100%. So, as always, thank you for making the trip down. And,
of course.
And for continuing to keep your hand in Central Penn College and what we have going on. And
go Knights.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andrew, again, thanks again for all that you've done with not only the club, but with sports as well. You've just been crushing it. So thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. I want to thank Nightly News Hall of Famer Brian Christiana and Nightly News sports reporter Andrew Hunter for joining us today. Until next time, this is Professor Paul Miller, and we'll see you again next time on the Nightly News Podcast.
I'm Dylan Bowman, former president of the Nightly News, and you're listening to the Nightly News Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I'm so honored to be joined by one of our wonderful student success coaches, Megan Kaiser. Megan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much, Paul. Good to be here.
And you have like such a wonderful radio voice. You're always so super enthusiastic, but I think you might have missed your calling.
No, I promise I didn't.
Well, I'm glad that you're here today, and thank you so much. So a few things that we want to talk about today. First of all, we can kind of talk about your new role and how that's sort of changed over time. But really what we're going to focus on today is the AFA movie night. It's going to be Friday, May 5th from 6 to 9. They're going to be showing Dog, and we're going to talk about why that is, how the AFA got involved with that, and we're also going to be looking at a couple of things that the AFA has scheduled for later this year. Well, I think one of the first questions that we want to kind of start off with is, how has your role changed in the shift? Because you went from, running the Learning Center, and now you've kind of been put into a different role here on campus. So do you want to just talk a little bit about how your job shifted? And maybe a question that I hear a lot, what are student success coaches' role in advising and just the whole student success piece of what we're trying to instill in our students here?
That's a great question. The best elevator speech I've come up with is, I help people succeed. And if I need to go into a little more detail, it's a lot of, I answer the question, what do I do? So it used to be that I was in charge of the tutors, and it was, how do I get through this class? But now it's much more general. How do I get through college? How do I get my financial aid squared away so that I can come back next term? How do I make sure that I'm on track to play my sport next year? How do I figure out a way to take a term off because my son just got diagnosed with a terminal illness? That's very morbid, but it happens.
Absolutely, it happens. I mean, you'd be surprised how frequently you hear those types of things. So really just in general, like if things come up in someone's life, helping them through that, connecting them with resources. The first thing that I'm so glad that you pointed out was the financial aid piece. Because for me, and I've advised my students all along just because of a variety of reasons. And so for me, this transfer or switch hasn't been as difficult as maybe it has been for other majors across campus. But the biggest problem that I have is that I frankly don't know much of anything about the financial aid process, and I will tell a student what is in their best interest to do without that knowledge. And so I think that is something that is wonderful and in addition to what we're offering as faculty advisors, because frankly, I just simply don't want to tell somebody the wrong information. And so to have somebody there from a financial aid perspective, even though you're not necessarily in the financial aid department, you can at least direct them to the right folks that are going to give them the information that they need.
Sometimes they actually sit across my desk and we call financial aid together, have them on speaker so that we can both find out what's going to work for the student.
I mean, even better. And I appreciate the individual and personalized touch that the student success coaches are given to our students. Another interesting thing is the idea of athletics. Obviously, we've got a lot of students here that are participating in athletics, and there are certain guidelines and requirements for our students who do participate in sports. Just generally speaking, can you talk about what some of those might be in order for the average athlete to remain eligible throughout their time here? What are some of the key things that they should be considering?
You would think that GPA is the biggest thing, but our college actually has more stringent GPA requirements than the athletics do. So the big thing that gets students is they need to complete 27 credits in a 12-month period in order to play their sport. And so if they withdraw from a class, there's 3 credits knocked out. If they skip a term, take summer off, there's 9 credits, maybe 12 credits knocked out that they don't get to add into their 27. So I do a lot of tracking which classes students are in, whether they're withdrawing, whether they're dropping, whether they're failing, and help them plan out, can I play my sport based on the schedule I'm keeping?
And do you ever have any faculty members reaching out to you in terms of like for advising purposes to learn some of these things? Like what type of interaction are you having with other faculty members since this change, especially since, you have a lot of knowledge on some of these things, which frankly, I don't think the average faculty member might know.
I haven't had faculty reach out, but I can't blame them. I started this position in January, the same time they became faculty advisors, so we're all learning together.
And I think I know that the first term, I think we were all sort of in that boat, and I'm hoping that as terms go by, we're going to get a bit more comfortable with this. But even just like what you're talking about, like with the 27 credit load in the year, like I didn't even know that, and I have. I found that out maybe 2 terms ago, but I didn't know that, and that would have been information that would have been really, really helpful in order for me to give my students the best advice possible, because that's the biggest challenge here with advising. All we want is for our students to be successful, but if they have a bad term, maybe fail a class, maybe withdraw from a class, that does have pretty significant implications, especially if a student wants to take summer off or miss a term. That can have some pretty significant ramifications on their eligibility as well. So there's a specific group of people who you work with as part of your student success. So who are the people that you work with typically?
I've got the athletes, and I get to work with our veteran students, which is a privilege.
Which moves us on to sort of our next piece that we're going to talk about, and that is your involvement with the AFA. So the AFA club has been going on here for many years and has changed advisors over time. So how did you get put into this role as being the advisor of the Armed Forces Association Club?
Well, I'm sorry for any of the other advisors who are listening, because I may have just stepped on their toes. I didn't realize there was an advisor, and so I just said, hey, I'm going to do this, and it was accepted. So I've got some other co-advisors who can assist, but because of my new role supporting veterans and putting programming together for veterans, it just seemed to make sense to say programming we do can be through the AFA. That way we can incorporate students into it also.
Absolutely. And so the AFA is a club on campus that is for active duty or veterans, correct?
Mm-hmm. Armed Forces Association.
So that's going to be anybody who is currently a member of our military or has served previously can be a part of the AFA. So in the past, just based on what knowledge that you have, what were some of the things that the AFA had done to build a presence here on campus?
I mean, the thing that they were most known for was their cookouts. They did a Memorial Day celebration and a Veterans Day celebration with a big cookout, and they did a great job of inviting speakers to come and honor veterans. And it was something that the whole campus could gather around for those days to celebrate our armed forces.
Even last Veterans Day, I remember that we had a speaker to campus who was so memorable and such a wonderful human being. And I apologize, I can't remember his name. But some of these things that the AFA has done are some of the more memorable things that I recall on campus, mainly because my family has been involved in the military. My grandfather served in the Korean War, and I have some very, very close friends who are active duty in the military or veterans in the military, as well as having multiple students in my classes who are also either active duty or, speaking of which, our very good friend Parker Rose, I got to run into him on Friday, and I got to announce that he is going to be inducted into the Nightly News Hall of Fame this homecoming season. We're going to be one of the official events, but he is also one of those people who is an active duty military member, as well as a volunteer firefighter, by the way, which is among the 1,000 other things that he does. But that just goes to show you how important military men and women are into Central Penn College, and always have been, and I believe always will be. But how is a military student, what perspective do they have that's different from maybe some of your average Central Penn College students?
I hate to generalize any group of students because it might not be entirely true.
Absolutely.
But the experience that I've had is one of some dedication. They know what they're going for and know how to achieve it. I've actually known some of our veteran students to have to withdraw and say, nope, can't handle this after all. But it's always very deliberate. It's not, oh, I just fell behind. It's, I made a conscious decision. And that's one of the things that impresses me.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk about some of these events that you have coming up. First of all, this is the first for our campus. The AFA Movie Night with Dog is going to be taking place on Friday, May 5th from 6 to 9 p.m. in the Capitol Blue Cross Theater. First of all, but off air when we were kind of getting ready for the show today, you'd mentioned that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So let's make the connection for maybe those who have never seen this film, why you picked this particular movie for this sort of intersection between the Armed Forces Association and Mental Health Awareness Month.
So the Washington Post published an article about this movie that I thought was very insightful. It commented on how the movie is advertised as a comedy, as something very lighthearted, and yet it goes into some really heavy topics, including veteran suicide, post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, even substance abuse is addressed throughout this film, and it portrays it in a way that is heartwarming. I mean, it's a dog. If you don't want to hear spoiler alert, just mute for 30 seconds. But the dog does not die. Adrienne Thoman made me promise her the dog would not die, or she was unwilling to watch this movie. But it's heartwarming, and it goes into such important things in a way that is real. I've had my 6 and my 8-year-old watch this movie because it's fun. We love it. And when in one scene they see a veteran who's really struggling with the problems that he brought home from war. They were scared. I mean, as scared as they get during a not violent movie. And we told them, no, the actor's fine, but here's what he's portraying. And so it does a good job of kind of opening people's eyes to the things that veterans actually go through. One veteran student, when he heard about this activity, he said, now people will understand why I sit in a corner and cry sometimes. I mean, he was exaggerating, but...
What I think is very interesting, and part of the reason that I have not only been a major part of the film series as the co-chair or the chair of this CPC Film Series committee, but also why I've decided to spend my career basically studying film, is because of exactly what you just said. And it was so poignant that you said that just now, because I think that a lot of people, when I tell them what I'm studying, kind of just... I don't want to say laugh, because that's not true. Most of the people I talk to are super interested in what I'm studying. But I've also run into people that are like, okay, well, I'm not really solving the ills of the world. I'm not necessarily saving people's lives. So on the surface, when you tell people that you're studying film, or, I just did a presentation at a national conference about a television show.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you. This is the type of thing that I'm trying to get across. Like, when you study film and when you study elements of popular culture, you are able to communicate certain things with certain groups of people. In this particular case, it seems to me, now I've only seen part of the movie, and I apologize, and I promise you I will watch it, because I saw the first half and I want to watch the second half. But I would simply say this. This film, while fun and certainly touching in a way, it also explains some of the serious issues, in this case, of our veterans. I mean, you mentioned it, right? Post-traumatic stress, even potentially suicide. And these are very serious things that people are dealing with in our society. And I think a lot of times that if you don't necessarily have people around you who are in the military or have experienced this, you don't know that this is what people are going through. I mean, I guess societally, we, hopefully understand that our military men and women do deal with these types of things and do deal with mental health concerns. But when you watch a movie like this, it changes your perspective. And I believe that by studying popular culture, we can understand more about the role that media has in our general society, and how it can help us to understand things that other people, even in a fictional account, or let me back up. Dog is it based on a true story? So it's entirely fictional.
It is, yes.
But in that fictional story, you are able to convey messaging about a very, very important group of people to our country, our society, and the challenges that they deal with. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is why it's so important that I have decided that this is where I want to focus my research. And yes, I suppose I'm not saving lives, but when you think about this film, I think it's probably safe to say that many people, I don't want to put a number on it, many people have watched this movie and maybe it helped them in some way. Maybe it helped them from potentially engaging in things that are not going to be healthy for them one way or the other.
If you read the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, people do say that this taught them something about themselves or the people they know, and it was significant that way. I hope that it takes the conversation from thank you for your service to tell me about your service, and just helps us to incorporate the veteran lifestyle into our mainstream conversation.
And that's one of the many reasons why I think it's important that we continue these types of things, whether it be this film series or whether it's AFA movie night on May the 5th. So along with this, you also have some panelists who are going to be coming along. So can you share with us a bit more about what you anticipate the panel discussing, who might be involved, and anything else that you want to share about that particular aspect of this?
Yes, our panelists are Jeff Hawks from the Army Heritage Center Foundation, as well as a clinician coming from the VA who is a social worker that has treated veterans. And our goal is to talk about some of the resources veterans can turn to for these mental health dilemmas, whether it's helping them transition from military to civilian life smoothly, or if it's suicide prevention, or if it's substance abuse treatment, that sort of thing. And I'm excited to hear what they have to say. The panel will discuss that after the movie because all of our discussion questions are tied back to the characters in the film.
Yeah, I know in the film series we try to do it up front simply because we're hoping, I'm not necessarily hoping that most people haven't seen the film, but maybe just here's what some things to look for in the film. Whereas for this particular panel, I mean, it's perfect to do it after the film because you're going to have that all fresh in your mind. And some of these topics are going to help you roll into some of this conversation that you're going to have. So I certainly wish you all of the best with AFA Movie Night. That's, again, Friday, May 5th. That's 6 o'clock.
I need to put in one final plug about it.
Of course.
We are giving refreshments for free, which is a little different, I think, from the film series. But we are requesting donations to support Pennsylvania Wounded Warriors, Inc., which is a organization that pays checks to help veterans with their basic needs like rent or school supplies and utilities. And we should have representatives from them coming to tell the audience what they do.
Wonderful. It's very similar to what we do with the film series. We usually just do everything by donation just to support whichever club is supporting, which is very similar. So make sure you bring a couple of dollars so you can donate that to Wounded Warrior. A couple of other things that I wanted to talk about here, Megan. Of course, Memorial Day coming up in May. And Memorial Day is always one of the times where I know that AFA is very visible on campus. So there is going to be a cookout on Wednesday, May 23rd from 11:30 to 1:30. And while, you don't have to go into a whole lot of detail about it, put it on your calendar and we'll see you there. Why is it so important for the AFA Club to continue this tradition of the Memorial Day cookout here on campus?
Well, it's Memorial Day. I mean, if there's any time to recognize those who have served in the armed forces, it's on the day that we memorialize everything that they've done. Yes.
And I think it's also what's unique about the cookout as well is that anytime, just generally speaking, anytime you have a cookout, there's a nice meeting and collaboration between people. I think it's really interesting because that's one of the days where you see so many people outside talking and maybe even just remembering a family member or friend or maybe even themselves. I mean, we certainly have faculty and staff members who have served as well, trying to recognize and honor those folks around a burger or a dog or something like that. I think is very important. And also on an annual calendar, this is one of the more memorable days that I remember. So please make sure that we save the date for Wednesday, May 23rd. Now, that is the Wednesday before Memorial Day because
Correct.
College is closed on Memorial Day. But that is the Wednesday before Memorial Day, May 23rd at 11:30 out in the quad, and that'll go till 1:30. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is a new project that you're going to be working on, something around September 11th. So tell us a little bit. Of course, I know that we have many months before that's coming, but just some of the preliminary discussions that you've had about this particular experience, and tell us a little bit more about what we can expect.
Well, there's a whole national organization of AFAs, we'll call it. They don't actually use that acronym, but it's clubs for veterans. And they have a 9/11 day of service. And so it's an opportunity for us to be part of something that is nationwide on a day that most of us can relate to. I mean, not all of us have served in the armed forces, but any of us who are, above the age of 25 probably have some memory of 9/11. and it's a day that we can honor that memory by serving in our community. So we're hoping to do some kind of organized service project that is local, but we'll also invite others to serve wherever they are on that day.
I would also point out that just a general rule, the college does allow us 8 hours a year without having to take PTO to do something like this. I think that would be a great way for us to use those hours. But yeah, I mean, when you think about 9/11, I remember exactly where I was. I mean, I remember the whole day, like the back of my hand. I was at Slippery Rock. I had my classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and it was a Tuesday. And I had my morning class started at 8, so that wasn't impacted. I went to my second class, which started at 10, and basically the professor had something up, like a news story, like, and the way that, if you remember, like when the first plane hit, people didn't really realize at the time that it was an airliner, that they thought that somebody just got lost in the fog and unfortunately hit a building. Of course, we ultimately knew that wasn't going to happen. And it was till lunchtime where I had common hour, and I jumped in my car and headed home. And of course, it was on every radio station. And of course, I'm starting to hear about, terrorism and things like that. And it was like, whoa. This is like a huge. I'm sitting in my car like, wait a minute, what just happened? And then, of course, we didn't go to class that afternoon. Basically, everything shut down. But I remember that night just sitting around the TV, watching CNN, and just being with all of my friends. I mean, we're college students ourselves, and to have to go through that was just unbelievable. I mean, what memories do you have of that day?
10th grade, 4th period study hall. It had already hit both buildings by then, and we sat and we watched it. And I remember my professor in a class, my teacher, it was high school, in a class later that day. She was from Ukraine originally, and I don't know what all she had experienced in her life, but she told us that in crisis, the best thing you do is keep a routine. So she was teaching class. And it was the only class I had that day that actually gave us instruction, but I have remembered that and used it in crisis. Keep a routine.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I mean, certainly as we look back, not a good day for the country. But I think if nothing else, as we look back on it, and now some of these veteran organizations are using this day to do service projects. I mean, I think if at a minimum we're looking back on this day as a day that literally changed our country moving forward. And I think to be able to give back to some local organizations on that day, I think is going to be very special. So if anyone wants to help with that or be a part of it, of course, they can reach out to you as we move through the summer. Mm-hmm. All right, just a quick recap again. The AFA Movie Night with Dog is going to be on Friday, May 5th from 6 to 9 in the theater. And save the date for the Memorial Day Cookout, Wednesday, May 23rd at 11:30 on the Quad. And keep in mind, of course, we'll have our Veterans Day celebration later in the year, but the 9/11 Service Project, we're going to be hearing a lot about that soon. So, Megan, it sounds like you're keeping busy.
Yes, very.
And as always, if you are an athlete or you are one of our military students, or really just in general you have questions, you can always reach out to Megan in her role as a student success coach.
Yes, thank you.
So, and Megan, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing with us about this. Again, very close personal things as far as service and the military in my own family. I'm sure we all have some connection to that. So, just supporting the AFA where we can continue this being a viable club on campus and continue making some amazing strides here for our servicemen and women.
Thank you so much, Paul.
All right. That's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. Special thanks go out to student success coach Megan Kaiser. Thank you so much for joining us, Megan. And that's going to do it. We'll see you again next time on the Nightly News Podcast.